Get the career you want with the skills employers need. Make a BTEC work for you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching the Skills World Live Radio Show. Today broadcasting from Walsall College in the West Midlands. Now, will you please welcome the programme's presenter, Tom Bewick.
Hello and welcome everyone to this very special roadshow edition of Skills World Live. It's the live tour where we get around the country connecting in person the world of FE. All made possible and proudly sponsored by the awarding body giant Pearson, BTEC and apprenticeships. Today, as you can see, we're in the wonderful surroundings of the main atrium of Walsall College, where we've set up in what the staff and students have called the T-Level Innovation Hub. Now, I'll be introducing my wonderful and super informed panel of guests very shortly. But before I do that, I want to remind our audience and those watching here and online that the real stars of this format of the show are the learners themselves. Because today, not only have we got 4 brilliant students asking our panel all the difficult questions, but the whole episode is a co-production between the BTEC students here at the college's in-house media company and the fab team that's here with me from Skills World Live Productions.
You're listening to the Skills World Live Radio Show with Tom Bewick.
So without further ado, let's meet our panel, shall we? Melissa Tisdale is a media lecturer here at Walsall College. She's also the head of her own film company that enables Walsall College students to record live briefs like this one today and work for external organisations like the NHS. And another big claim to fame I discovered is that Melissa picked up a Pearson National Teaching Award last year and is currently the FE Lecturer of the Year. Next, we're delighted to have Dr. Fiona Aldridge, who is Head of Insight and Intelligence at the West Midlands Combined Authority, which is run by the elected regional mayor in these parts, Andy Street. Fiona is a well-known figure in the FE sector, having previously been the Director of Policy and Research at the Learning and Work Institute. Let's introduce now our major employer voice on the panel in Sharon Blyfield OBE, who is the Head of Early Careers at Coca-Cola Europacific Partners. Sharon's been with the company in various roles for 27 years. And over that time period, Sharon's also worked tirelessly to give young people, in particular, across all communities, access to the recruitment market. Finally, joining us from the college is James Norris. He's the Assistant Principal for Commercial Development, which means he gets to sit on a number of external boards that help businesses here in the West Midlands connect to the skilled talent available. Audience, would you please give a warm welcome to my super informed panel of guests. Let's go now to our first student question, shall we? And it's being asked by Adam Matara, who is a Level 2 student in Protective Services. So Adam, over to you.
What does the slogan levelling up mean to people with further education and skills in the wider region of the West Midlands and Walsall?
Adam, thank you for that. So what does a slogan like levelling up through further education and skills actually mean for people living in towns like here in Walsall and, of course, the wider West Midlands region? I think that's the question that should go to Dr. Fiona Aldridge to start off with.
Thank you. First of all, it's a slogan, isn't it? And we can decide, and Walsall can decide what it means for you. And at the West Midlands Combined Authority, we're really thinking through what this means for the West Midlands. I think for me, it means making sure that all of you get the right skills, the right learning opportunities to start your career well but also as you go through your career to make sure you've got the right opportunities to continue to progress, to get a different job, a better job, maybe throughout your life to continue and change careers. But I think importantly, it's not just about making sure you've got the right skills, it's making sure there are good jobs here too. So hopefully you will have an amazing set of skills that means you can get jobs anywhere. But actually, if you want to stay here, there should be really good jobs for you here too. So as well as investing in skills, we want to make sure there are right employers with really good jobs for you. And I think when we do both of those, then we make a really step forward in levelling up.
James, Fiona mentioned there, she didn't use these words exactly, but in effect what she was saying is that the vision of the West Midlands Combined Authority around skills and further education is that the young people here, and indeed adults, shouldn't feel that they have to leave the West Midlands to achieve their dreams, to achieve their career goals. What's your perspective on that, as someone that's very closely involved with business in the local community?
So, I agree with Fiona. So the levelling up agenda is around a slogan, and from our perspective, I welcome, though, the spotlight on the levelling up agenda, and specifically for Walsall, where in the 315 odd pages of the levelling up document, I don't expect you all to read it. Well, not this side of the weekend.
Clearly you
anyway.
have, though, James.
Absolutely, I have. Actually, Walsall's mentioned in there a number of times, and that's a good thing, because I want our students to have access to good employment opportunities here on their doorstep. That's not to say that students shouldn't widen their horizons by either studying or working in different parts of the country or different parts of the world. But I think the opportunities that this gives us is the ability to have a call to action from a place-based approach, where we can start to balance up what others might have had in parts of the country that we've missed out on, and really give those opportunities here at a local level for our students and indeed our staff moving forward.
Okay, so again, what I'm hearing here is it's about local opportunities, isn't it, and ensuring that they're available for everyone. James, you also said it's a bit of a slogan, levelling up. Melissa, do you feel the same, that it's a bit of a slogan?
Yes, I completely agree with what they said as well. I think in terms of me being a lecturer and working with the kids very closely, with the students very closely, the model we set up in the media production, Future Flames, is a great example of that, how we work with the local community. We provide opportunities locally for people to see that they don't need to necessarily move to London to be successful in the media industry, that they can get contacts here and they can freelance in the subject that they are training to work in, and that they have got opportunities. So I think having these kind of platforms like Future Flames Production that we've got, I'm connecting them to the employers so that when they do leave, they've got those connections and they don't feel like, to be successful, I need to move away. So they can stay here to be successful. So I agree as well.
Yeah. Sharon, you're a great Midlands champion, I know, and you represent a brand that's probably no bigger in some ways than Coca-Cola. It's a household name. And Melissa there was talking about the fact that yes, the West Midlands may have a reputation, I suppose, for manufacturing type jobs, but of course it's so much more diverse than that, isn't it? You've got a media and creative industries as well. But you represent a huge company with lots of different types of jobs and occupations. What's your sense of how you make something like levelling up real in the workplace?
I think levelling up is a very interesting term, and Adam, the fact you talk about it being a slogan, because we talk also about social mobility. We talk about creating equal opportunities for everybody. So, levelling up happens to be the phrase of the day. That's the way I would absolutely see it. And for organisations such as mine, which you are right, it's a huge household name, it's about how do we actually attract, the next generation who will make soft drinks to come and work for us. Because a lot of people look at it and say, oh, couldn't possibly work for that company, because they don't have a place in Walsall. But in actual fact, we have a huge sales force who operate within Walsall and the West Midlands. And for us, it's about understanding how do we make those connections, but also how do we work with FE to ensure that the right skills are being delivered, so that that young person, or maybe an older adult coming back into the workplace, has the same opportunity as somebody who has maybe grown up in London and has had much more opportunity. So I think levelling up, it's just the phrase for today, because I suspect 5-10 years down the line, we'll have a totally different slogan that'll be used.
Yeah, and I'm old enough to remember things like New Deal for communities and that kind of language as well that we've seen, I think, under successive governments over the years. But what I thought was really interesting about what all four of you have said is you've come back to this point about we've got to get the investment in the right skills at the right time for employers that are in the local area. We've got to sort of invest as much as we can in individuals, and not necessarily, although it's important, we invest in infrastructure. And I have to say, when I look at a lot of the actual policy solutions that the government puts forward around levelling up, they tend to talk about a new paint job on the high street, or a football pitch being put in. And again, I don't want to knock these things. They're really important. If you've got a really shoddy football pitch or can't even access that in your local community, having that X millions of pounds invested in making that infrastructure work is going to be really important. Transport, housing, these are all really important. But Fiona, you're sort of on the people side of the business, aren't you, at the West Midlands Combined Authority? Do you think the Mayor's got a real challenge to get that balance right, though, between what you might say investment in infrastructure? HS2 is going to be coming to this part of the world. Billions of pounds are being spent on that. But what about investment in a place like Walsall College?
Absolutely. So I think the Mayor is really focused on skills and making sure that we've got the right opportunities for people who live here, but also that people have the opportunity that people have the right skills so that new businesses want to come. So one of the things that I've been really conscious of, so I've been at the Combined Authority a few months, is that actually lots of really big names are having conversations with us about moving into the region. And what they want to know is, have you got the people with skills that we can start to work with, and skills that we can continue to develop? Because that's when I think businesses will invest. Now, we all want to live in really nice places, but actually when you've got a good job and you've got great businesses here, then that does create the revenue to create those great places as well. But I think one of the advantages of a combined authority is they've got other responsibilities as well. So there's a responsibility around transport and housing, for example. And actually, so as well as thinking about the skills, we need to make sure that you've got the skills for a job, but you can get there as well. So there's no point there being a great job over there if you're over here and can't drive. So we need to make sure there's a bus route or a tram route or a train route. And actually, a combined authority has this brilliant benefit of being able to think about a place and think about everything within a place to connect it together, to make sure that all sorts of opportunities are available for people who live here and people who want to live here. So people are key. People make a place. It's great to live in beautiful places, but actually having the right skills for jobs for now, but jobs for the future as well, are really important, because our economy is really changing.
Yeah. James, we've talked, and Fiona very eloquently put it there in terms of what is required in a place like the West Midlands, and uniquely, you might say, in these islands, we've got 8 of these devolved areas now that have a directly elected mayor with powers. I'm sure if the mayor was here, we might say he needs more powers, particularly in the area of skills funding. But you're seeing, in a sense, it from both ways, because you're also a college that's increasingly operating, I would argue, in a more national system. Yep. Education Skills Funding Agency is national. You've got here with the T-level programme, a relationship, of course, you'll have with the Department for Education, which is hundreds of miles away from here in Whitehall. And you've also got right on the patch here, of course, Andy Street and the Combined Authority. Is that quite a complex set of relationships for you to navigate through? And where do you think the power should really sit in the future around skills funding?
That's a really good question. So the first answer is the environment that we work in for FE Skills and Provision complex? I think that's an understatement. Yeah. And I think that there are challenges which I think, both from a national and a devolved perspective, that all of the stakeholders involved appreciate the fact that some of that complexity and bureaucracy has got to be stripped out of the system to make it more effective. What I think, and just coming back to the levelling up piece though, and particularly where, again, I'm going to come back, talk passionately about Walsall, because that's obviously where my passion lies, is I welcome the spotlight, because what it actually means to me, whether it's the slogan or not, is a call to action for whether it's a national body or whether it's a local devolved organisation or even a local footprint, whether that's councils or community groups, to really start to bring together collective resource to make a difference. And Tom, you mentioned there, you've been around a bit, you've seen these things come and go. One of the
got the grey hairs for it
yeah,
as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, and one of the groups that I chair locally, their mandate is okay. So we started off, and we have this ability, don't we, to talk ourselves. We've seen it all before.
Yeah, you're too cynical.
But where's the change?
Yeah.
So I think for me, the fact that you've got a national government policy that then sort of has that local place-based approach and gives that connectivity, I am optimistic that we can do something good from a place-based perspective, but I also welcome the wraparound transport, housing, etc., because that means then our students can progress, get on a train, get that infrastructure to go and work for Sharon at one of her bases down in the southeast, for example. It's about having that ability to really level that playing field.
Okay, well, what a clarion call there for what levelling up means in Walsall. I'm afraid we're levelled out on the time for that particular segment. But panel, thank you very much indeed for that.
You're listening to the Skills World Live radio show with Tom Bewick.
Now, our second audience question comes from Konrad Kimchik, who is a Level 4 student studying networking and computing. Konrad, over to you.
So, does the panel agree that young people and adults should have maximum choice when it comes to deciding which course and qualifications they want to study?
Now, Konrad, this actually refers to quite a big reform that's going on at the moment in qualifications. It's known as, rather bureaucratically, as the Level 3 and below reform of qualifications, of post-16 qualifications. Who was I going to go to first? Sharon. I was going to land this controversial hot potato on you. It was all about choice there from Konrad. Potentially his choices are going to be badly affected in the future, aren't they?
They definitely will be. So I did a post on social media, in particular about BTECs, because BTECs are close to my heart. I didn't go to university. I went the vocational route. I did my BTEC in business and finance. And for me, that was the right choice. If you start to take away those choices and combine lots of different programs together and go, well, because we've got T levels, for example, we don't need BTECs. All of a sudden, you remove that choice and you remove, what somebody could absolutely achieve. Who wants to necessarily do a T level that's really, really technical? That might not suit someone's learning style. And so absolutely, you need to have choices. You need to have bite-sized choices of courses you want to do or longer courses that you want to do. We talked before around, aspiration and what is it that people want. You take away those choices, you limit someone's aspiration. So yes, for me, there is a massive rallying cry that the people in government really need to actually talk to students that it's going to impact and affect, not just today, but those coming through. Because let's be brutally honest, not everyone's going to want to go to university, and that's not going to change whether we are in 2022 or 2032. Yeah. We absolutely need that student choice.
And of course, historically, we've done very well in this country at enabling 50% of under 30-year-olds to go to university, and we haven't always necessarily given as much love and attention to the so-called other 50%. Melissa, coming to you now then, because in a sense, as a media lecturer here, and also, you head up this production company. It gives students these wonderful opportunities to work on live briefs. This is really applied technical learning. This isn't just all theory and just reading textbooks in the classroom every day. But coming at it from the perspective now as someone that's been teaching BTECs, and I should say, BTECs are brand of qualifications. There are lots of other level 3 applied general qualifications as well that equally potentially face the chop under these reforms. I mean, Sharon focused there on the point about student choice, but there's also a choice for here at the college, the choices you and your curriculum leads make about which qualifications you want to provide to students. How do you feel about the government coming along and saying to you from 2024 you'll no longer be able to provide those types of qualifications, but you can deliver, for example, government-owned T levels?
I think from a lecturing point of view, I think there's a misconception that we are anti-T levels, and that's not the case.
Well, we're here in the T-level innovation hub. It's fantastic.
I think T levels are suitable for specific courses, and some courses it's not appropriate. again, using media as an example, I have students who are very practical, but I do have students who like to watch films and pick them apart and analyse them and know why things have been done for that reason. So they are a little bit more academic, and the BTEC does allow them to study both ends of the spectrum with that. And I think really at the end of the day, it's quite naive really to just assume that young people, and I say this with myself as well, for us to know what we want to do for the rest of our lives is really naive. I change my mind all the time. You know, I think, I might do this next week, I might do that. And that element of choice is just so valuable, and the thought of it being taken away, not from a lecturing point of view, obviously it upsets us that we can't deliver what they want, but also for them not to be able to come in and see the full scope of media and what media can be. It's not just pressing on the record button on a camera. It can be very academic at the same time. You know, on my personal pathway, I'm a little bit of both. I'm quite practical, but I also am very academic. I'm doing my PhD at the moment as well. But I came from a BTEC, and that BTEC allowed me to have that choice.
Which is why, of course, they're called applied general qualifications, right? Because you can literally have the best of both worlds. Fiona, coming to you now on this point, and I'm going to introduce for the first time, I mean, it's a well-known acronym to us now, but perhaps the audience watching or here in the room haven't heard of. You heard of LSIPs, everyone? No? LSIPs, well, they're the new fancy local skills improvement plans. That's what that stands for. And colleagues like Fiona and her colleagues at the West Midlands Combined Authority have been given the lead role to develop these local skills improvement plans, along with employer representative bodies and, of course, the college and lots of other stakeholders. But Fiona, coming to you, are these LSIPs then the answer? Going back to that previous question about levelling up, are they also the answer to ensuring we get the right qualifications and skills mix right here in the West Midlands?
Well, let me just take a step back. I'll come to your question, but I agree that choice is really important, but I think informed choice is important, because one of the challenges is here's loads of qualifications and you don't quite know what to choose. And so hopefully, and I'm sure you will here, have great information, advice and guidance to help you make those decisions. Other people won't have such good opportunities. Once you're already in the workplace, then it could be quite hard to find that advice. And so I think absolutely choice, but I think we need to do better nationally about making sure people have got the right support to make those choices. Else you could end up choosing a qualification or choosing a course, and actually that doesn't get you to where you want to be. Or if you haven't had that proper information, advice and guidance, that wasn't where you really wanted to be anyway. It was just a kind of, that's what you thought working in that occupation looks like. And then you kind of layer onto that the fact that lots of jobs that are emerging now, actually we just don't know much about either. So I heard this statistic from the census that we've all completed. I think it said something like 60% of the jobs that people are doing now didn't even exist 3 censuses ago. And so the world's getting quicker. So the sorts of jobs you will do just didn't exist when I left school and university. And maybe the sort of job I'll go on to do doesn't. Yeah. So we've got to think about getting really good advice and guidance. Now, when you come to the point about LSIPs, so LSIPs are basically thinking about what we need to do is have a plan for what sort of skills provision we need. And the LSIP bit in particular is thinking about we need to make sure that there's some employer voice in that, so that we're engaging with businesses to say, what skills and qualifications do you need when people come into your occupation or your sector, and then what sort of skills and qualifications do you need to progress? And actually that's really important to be able to set that out so you know how to get in and how to get on. But it's just part of the picture, because actually, as you say, I think I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. It's just I'm here. And in a kind of, you might have 50 years worth of career, you'll want to change and develop even if the world around you doesn't change. So we need to think about those future jobs and plan strategically. And then as a combined authority, as providers, we need to make sure that those qualifications and those courses really meet the need. Now, like levelling up, LSIP is the latest name for something that we've had several goes at, but it is really important that we do as much work to think about what employers need and what the economy needs, and then think about what you need and the sort of pathways you want to go on, and pulling all that together is a real challenge.
Can I come in on that, because it's an interesting one. So if I think about the employer voice, so we're a big organisation, because we're not associated directly with Walsall or the West Midlands, how do you know what we want for that future skills, because we, as I said earlier, we've got our sales forces, we've got our engineering teams, but nobody's come and said, well, actually West Midlands need a voice from Coca-Cola, who are probably more of a national organisation. What is it that they want? So everyone always talks about the employer voice, but I never know which employer you're actually talking to.
And indeed, Sharon, I think you've been very passionate on this agenda recently, penning an article, I think, for FE Week, talking about that it's not that employers want to own the skills system, I think you said, they just want a seat around the table. But what you're referring to there with Fiona is that, well, if you're a multi-site national employer, and when we talk about national, not just here in England, but of course across the whole of the United Kingdom, and you're a global multinational employer as well, James, how do you reconcile then that fit between effectively a whole load of pressure that's about to come your way from a whole bunch of stakeholders, many of whom you'll know and you'll be working with very well already, not least the Chambers of Commerce, who might say to you, you know what, get rid of all those qualifications that you've got currently because it doesn't meet the needs, my needs right now in this locality in the West Midlands. But how do you address Sharon's point? Because you equally might have these national multi-site employers who say, bring it on, Walsall College, provide more of these qualifications for us. We need students with those skills.
It is a really difficult challenge, and I think I have concerns about the level 3 and level 2 reforms generally, because I can't see, and I look at it from a personal perspective, and I worry for my son who's 11. He's not going to be able to. I don't want him to have to make a specific choice for a particular industry sector at the age of 16, 17, 18. I think that's just too narrow. I want to encourage him to have eyes wide open, quite rightly as Fiona says, for occupations that don't exist now. And I think that needs to be a real pick and mix of a solution. I agree with Fiona. I think we need to have a really good careers information advice and guidance, all age career information advice and guidance process that really helps and supports students to navigate the world that we're living in. But coming back to Sharon's view of the local skills improvement plans is around, I do have a concern that the local groups that are going to inform that will not be the voice of Coca-Cola. So it should be an employer-informed system, not an employer-led system that aggregates all of these needs together, but then has the breadth of provision that does give a choice to the people that are coming through our doors and saying, this is what we want to study. It's an interesting, and 9 times out of 10, that will give them really essential skills that employers are looking for.
Yeah. Alas, we're out of time on that question. I think we could probably spend the whole rest of the radio show just talking about qualifications, but thanks again for some brilliant contributions.
You're listening to the Skills World Live radio show with Tom Bewick.
Okay, for our third question, we're passing now to Cal Benjamin, who is a level 2 student in media production. Cal.
Is freedom of speech more important to protect on campus than running the risk of offending certain groups?
Great, thanks Cal for that. So this is quite a hot topic, isn't it, at the moment? It's in the news a lot about so-called cancel culture. Is freedom of speech more important to protect on campus than the risk of offending certain groups? Sharon, I'm going to land this hot potato on you first.
Oh, that is such an interesting question, especially from an employer perspective, because one of the things we have to ensure in the workplace is that it's not that we curtail freedom of speech, but we have to ensure that it's done in the right way, that it is not offensive to, all of the employee base, but also from a brand reputation perspective as well. We're balancing two things here. So we do want people to have a voice, but in the right way, and probably, most importantly, respectful. So just because you might have an opinion doesn't mean that your opinion is always going to be the right opinion. And I think it's the way that you put that message across, or debate about a particular point, will determine whether or not you can have freedom of speech. If you're very, very negative in the way you want to put it across in an organisation, that, in all honesty, creates big challenges for business within it. So maybe within the student environment, it might be slightly different, but when you come into the workplace, you've got to get that balance right.
But Sharon, if I could just press you a little bit on something you said there about it's important. I think you said something about having the right opinion. Do you think, though, that in a sense in itself starts to impinge on freedom of speech? Because what I think you always have to differentiate in this debate is what you might describe as lawful free speech and unlawful free speech. I mean, people will be very aware of the constitutional amendment in the United States, which guarantees freedom of speech, but it's actually against the law in the United States to run into a theatre hall and shout fire. And there's very clear reason why that is the case. So the idea that free speech is completely untrammelled and unlimited doesn't exist in any democratic society, actually, anywhere. And here in this society, we have laws against, for example, inciting racial hatred or going after particular groups with protected characteristics, ethnic minorities, for example. So there isn't that sort of freedom of speech to say whatever you like. But do you think it does start to get more contested when you have some people, employers including, I'm not saying you necessarily think this, that they're sort of saying you've got to have the right opinion and there's the wrong opinion? Surely there's only opinion, but there's either lawful opinion or there's unlawful
But I think
speech.
it's very much about how you position your opinion. That's the point I'm trying to get across here. Because there is freedom of speech and people can say hateful and hurtful things to other groups that, that they maybe just simply don't like. But sometimes it's about how you position it. And that's the point here with it. So yes, you can have freedom of speech. Yes, you can say within reason what you want to say. But you could have a really, really hard-hitting message that if you don't deliver it in the right way, doesn't get your message across. And I think that, for me, is what's really important.
Listen, come to you. I mean, you're an educator. I think it's worth stressing, obviously, well, everyone on this panel, you're giving your opinions today. You're not necessarily representing the institutions you work for, so let's just get that out there as a disclaimer on the podcast. So you can give us your free speech and your personal view on this subject. But you're right at the centre, really, aren't you? You and your fellow educators across further education and higher education at the moment. A minister, further and higher education minister's piloting a bill through the House of Commons and the House of Lords at the moment, which will look to guarantee students here and indeed people who visit the campus their freedom of speech. And if people potentially aren't happy with that, they could potentially take a college like this to court and say that their free speech was in some way infringed. I mean, how do you feel about that from a very personal perspective?
I think I completely agree with Sharon in the sense that there is freedom of speech and then there's hateful speech. I think in a classroom environment, it is an opportunity to have group discussions and things like that, where it is a very controlled environment where we can safeguard some people as well, where we can kind of have people express their opinions and for them to debate them in a healthy way instead of things teetering over to that hateful speech. We've had many instances in my classroom where we have had people who may not understand things. The world's a huge place and our view is very narrow to what we know, and sometimes people don't have that scope of other people's religions, other races and so on and so forth. And I think I strive on my classroom being an opportunity for them to learn about other people, but in a controlled way where I can safeguard my other students, because that's really important at the end of the day.
And Sharon absolutely touched on this, didn't she, when she, in effect, was really talking about the need for, you didn't use this word, Sharon, so forgive me, I'm putting this word into your mouth, but the way it hit me was this sort of notion of we just need greater civility in our debates. We need to kind of recognise that people will have different opinions, that just because you find something offensive and someone else has a different opinion, it doesn't necessarily mean, does it, James, that you've got to completely cancel them out of your life. It is actually okay to go down the pub afterwards or wherever you go, for a soft drink or for an ice cream and have a good old laugh about it.
I think, I agree with Sharon. We try to instill upon our students around giving them those skills and behaviours that equip them for the world of whether that's higher progression levels or whether that's into work. So I do agree with that, where there are certain behaviours that's expected within environments. But I think with regards to encouraging freedom of speech and discussion, again, I'm very passionate about the fact that we are within the place of Walsall. We have a very, very mixed and diverse demographic, and the college sits right in the centre of it. So if we were then in a position where we had to say, okay, then we can't have this general discussion, as an education provider, as a community anchor point, how is that encouraging bringing our communities together to have a discussion and maybe break down some of those barriers that they may then take back to their own homes and to their own community groups, and they might learn something new about a different part of the borough and says, actually I understand a bit more about that. I'm not afraid to approach that. I'm not afraid to have that dialogue or that view. So I think it's all about, from our work within the college is about preparing people for that discussion, allowing them to have that in a safe and controlled environment that really has an impact then when they go back out to their communities.
Yeah. Fiona, talking about diverse communities then here in the West Midlands, of course as a public servant you have freedom of speech as a citizen, but as a public servant you don't perhaps have as much freedom of speech as I or other people who are watching this broadcast do. But what's your kind of reflections on what is a hot potato at the moment, isn't it? I mean, it's sometimes also described as culture wars, I think very unhelpfully, because the idea we as a citizenry have to be at war with each other in order to have, as I say, it's back to this point about civility, isn't it? That's what we want to promote. But there's nothing wrong, is there, with differences of opinion?
No, and we've talked a lot about coming to college to prepare for work, but actually education is so much more than picking up a set of skills that enable you to go to work. It will give you a set of knowledge and skills and experience that will benefit the whole of your life, outside of work as well as inside. And actually, as you mentioned, just being able to meet different people, have different sorts of conversations, exposure to different sorts of backgrounds and contexts and ideas, that's such a key part of education. And so it's really important that there is that freedom of speech. But I think the question in a way puts it as an either or, and actually the truth is that it should be freedom of speech but done in a way that's really respectful and really curious and really wanting to engage, to make a point and learn how to make points well, but also to listen to what other people's points are and maybe even change your mind. So I think college is a great place for that broad education as well as just skills for work.
Absolutely. It's what I always say in my classroom. Yes, we teach media, but we teach so much more than that.
Yeah, indeed. And it has been a crazy week on the subject. I think actually a comedian here from the West Midlands had a visit from a police officer because somebody had gone along to one of his comedy gigs, had found one of his jokes offensive. I mean, no further action was taken, but the point was actually made that if you're going to go along to a stand-up comedy gig, you're probably going to be offended by the person who's on stage, because that's what they get paid to do. Conrad, I see you've still got the mic, which is great. Cal, sorry. Do you want to just give some reflections on this, because it's it is a hot potato, isn't it?
Yes, freedom of speech is a real hot potato, but in regards to freedom of speech, Piers Morgan, who was the former host of the Good Morning Britain, who essentially using his freedom of speech, he was able to convey how he felt about specific groups and hot topics, but later on was removed from the Good Morning Britain because of the woke mob or cancel culture, whatever the reason was. Do you think he was justifiably removed, or?
Wow, I never thought we'd have a question that was looking at defending Piers Morgan. I feel offended. He's a fellow, broadcaster, but that's fine. We've got just briefly on. Who wants to pick that up? Just one of you. Just pick up on that.
I think to a certain extent we've sort of answered it on the basis that if somebody's trying to force an opinion, a personal opinion, without having the right to recourse in that safe and controlled environment, then actually that's a freedom of speech, but without any kind of debate, any kind of... Now, he might come away from that and still have that same view, that's fine. But it's the ability to have a constructive and respectful debate in the right environment that really makes that dialogue even more interesting and more impactful.
Cal, thanks so much for your question. What another brilliant conversation we've just had there from our super informed panel of guests.
You're listening to the Skills World Live Radio Show with Tom Bewick.
OneFile is the best apprenticeship e-portfolio in the world. But did you know it's ideal for all kinds of vocational training, including traineeships? OneFile is very flexible, so it has everything you need to deliver, manage and track traineeship progress.
We're currently using OneFile for all our traineeship learners. They love it, and so do we. It's fabulous. Thank you, OneFile.
To find out more about OneFile, head to onefile.co.uk and book a demo with a member of the team.
As you've probably heard, audience, we've got a very energetic Walsall College. I can really feel the love and the energy, and I hope our mics are not picking up some of that other sound in the atrium as well, but that's the benefits, isn't it, of technology. So we're going to move on now to our final question. Doesn't time fly when you're having fun? And it comes from Steph Geary, who is a level 4 photography student. Steph, over to you.
Can the panel tell us about their most inspirational learning experiences and advise what they would advise others just starting out in their careers?
Thanks for that, Steph. It does make sense. And actually, after those 3 relatively controversial questions, isn't it nice to end on something a bit fluffier? So why don't we start with you, Melissa?
I think for me, I'm still, as I mentioned earlier, I'm still learning. I'm doing my PhD at the moment, and I'm constantly, at every stage, my connection with learning is connected to the teaching staff, the lecturers, and that's the people who stay with me. The people who have helped me, created memories for me, have pushed me and challenged me, and from working and developing myself over all these years, that really encouraged me to then go into this profession myself. So that mine's not so much, I'm partially scooting around this a little bit. Mine's not a specific experience, it's an ongoing great relationship with lecturing staff that has really inspired me to want to do that for my students. And the second part to the question, what I would say to encourage people, and I say this to my students all the time, and I can see them looking at me now, I say be a yes person all the time. Say yes to opportunities. You don't know where they're going to get you in life. A great example is one of my students who started doing very small jobs in the college, then progressed, and he now edits for Amazon Audible from just working with Future Flames over the time he was on the course. So be a yes person. That's the one I say.
There we go. Great advice. James, are you a yes man?
I think I'm going to do the same as Melissa. I answer it in 2 parts. So I was a bit like Tom actually, although I didn't have a great time at school and I didn't necessarily achieve very well. I was the first year of GCSEs, by the way, so we've just given our age. We've just given.
You can tell my audience I felt.
We've just given our age away, but. For me, I think I didn't do great at school and I didn't necessarily do very well in my exams, but I think the message that I would give is that you don't give up. You just keep looking for those opportunities. I do, coming back to the question about the narrowness potentially of curriculum, I would have struggled with that. I would have been disadvantaged by that narrow of curriculum because it would have sent me in a direction that potentially wouldn't then have given me the opportunity to get back on track, if that makes sense. From a learning perspective, I've had the opportunity, very great opportunities to study whilst I've been working on various things. But I think my biggest achievement was my son was going through his SATs a couple of weeks ago, and he was coming to me going, "Dad, I've got maths. So I've got this maths homework. Can you help me with this?" I hadn't got a clue. I was so out of touch with some of it. So I decided a couple of years ago to put myself back through my functional skills maths at level 2. I don't know why, but I did it. And I found that really, really rewarding because it was something just to say to me, I've achieved something. So from that perspective, I think it's don't give up, keep going, and just keep having a go at things that you think, right, maybe didn't work the first time, but I'll have a crack at it again.
Sharon, your title is Head of Early Careers, and you heard there so far from James and Melissa, who, again, just to summarise, grit, resilience, don't give up. You must have seen a few sort of false starts and got a few people over the line who didn't perhaps have the confidence that they could do it.
No, absolutely. I think for me, in the role that I do, I see it every day. And in actual fact, just before COVID happened, we have an annual apprenticeships awards, and in actual fact that happens next month for us. And one of our apprentices, 4-year engineering apprentice, at year 2 I thought, don't think he's going to really make it, is he? Doesn't have the right attitude, doesn't have the right behaviours, I'm not sure he's going to make it. And then in his final year, he's just turned it around. And I was so proud to stand on stage with him and as he became the Engineering Apprentice of the Year for our organisation. And it's those sorts of journeys and those sorts of stories that I see day in, day out. And I'm like the proud mother, but in the workplace, and I'm not necessarily sure the two really go together. And the whole lifelong learning for me is just so important. So, I went off, I did my HR CIPD, and then in actual fact, only last month I finished on the Genie programme, which has been run by Amazing Apprenticeships, which is very much focused on social mobility and how we as employers can upskill ourselves. So for me, I continuously go back and say, so I'm afraid I am the yes person that says, yes, I want an opportunity. And, I got asked a couple of weeks ago, how can we help you even further? And I was like, I'd like an executive coach, please, because I think an executive coach will then help me to take it to another level based on what I'm doing. So as you're coming into the workplace, look for those opportunities. And I tell you what, look for the role models and the people who maybe didn't go to university, but somehow have made it more senior in the business, and ask them to mentor you and to point you into the right direction of who else can support you and your career. And the beauty about apprenticeships as it stands today is everyone can go on an apprenticeship and continue learning all the way through without having to pay for it themselves.
So Sharon, can I ask you, would a young Sharon Blyfield 35 years ago, I mean, you're very young now, right? But 35 years ago, did you ever imagine then that you'd be trundling along to Windsor Castle and picking up an award, an honour, in fact, from Her Majesty the Queen in this Platinum Jubilee year?
So just to clarify, it's Buckingham Palace on the 7th of
To
July.
Buckingham Palace,
I'm going on the 7th of July.
You haven't been yet.
I haven't been yet, haven't been to actually pick it up.
Pick up your gong, you haven't got it yet.
I am still absolutely amazed that I am going to officially receive my OBE, because I associate that with superstars and people in the media and people in the press, not a girl from Shepherd's Bush, who went to West London College, didn't go to university. And I'm also amazed the fact that I'm sitting here today. Every time I do a panel, I'm amazed that, my goodness me, where have I come from? And the fact that people now want to me to talk to them, and I'm just humbled and grateful.
That's so inspirational. I think that deserves a very special round of applause. Fiona, let's hear your inspirational learning journey.
It's really hard to follow these guys, isn't it? But I think very much the same messages. So I did quite well in my exams and went to university and did things like this. But actually, if I think about...
That's okay, that is allowed.
It's allowed, isn't it? It is allowed.
We're not just celebrating failure here. We want success too.
You can do really well. But I think actually, then I went to work and I'm not sure I knew much, really.
Right.
And actually, I think the most exciting and inspirational learning is the stuff that I've done at work, the things where I've said yes to an opportunity that I didn't really know whether I could do, or the people that I chose to work alongside that just looked really impressive and I felt a bit of a fake, or the things that I tried and actually got wrong but decided to carry on, and actually over time learnt more from those mistakes than probably from the things that I've done well. And so I think, whether it's good news or bad news to you, finishing college is not the end of learning. Actually, you're going to carry on. And actually, that's the bit to embrace, because the things you learn as you go, as you step into opportunities, as you kind of meet other people, as you take on new roles, it's just fabulous. And very much like the apprenticeship story you shared, I used to work for an organisation that has a set of Festival of Learning award winners. And they're often for adult learners, people who perhaps didn't do well in education, or people who just left school, college, university and just didn't want to go back, but actually something in their life meant that they had to come back to learning as an adult. And they have the most amazing stories of the difference that learning has made to them as they've progressed their careers, or how they've supported their family, or recovered from a kind of health condition or accident. And for me, the stories of other people are inspirational. So I think just sharing your stories and finding out about other people, and the idea of kind of getting a coach or a mentor is absolutely, it's just brilliant advice, and I'd recommend you all to do that. It can be very different people across different stages of your careers, but there's just so much you can learn from other people.
So I've discovered my teenage kids are the best mentors in the world, because they just tell you the unvarnished, honest truth, don't they? But coming back then to lifelong learning, because I think that's what we're really talking about here. And you could say over the last sort of 50 years, we've had a sort of education system, and indeed the world of work. We had, first of all, the idea of a job for life. Well, a job for life certainly doesn't exist anymore. And then we've had a kind of education system that has been very much about, you might say, front-loading your education, or that thought in your head that education is just about school, FE, and for those that went on to university, about higher education as well. But that kind of linear path, that world, it's gone, isn't it? I mean, it went in, obviously, the era of full employment, but now in education, you might have 3, 4, 5 different jobs across a working lifetime of 40, 50 years. So how do we make a reality of this lifelong learning challenge? I mean, who wants to pick up on that? James?
I mean, again, I come back to, and we've sort of covered it off today, so the key strength of that is, and quite rightly, you know, the career plan for me was never to be an assistant principal in a general further education college. That was not on the radar at all, very much like fellow panellists have said today. But along the way, it's about that ability and access, that when you are going to look at skills development training, that we get that really good lifelong careers information, advice and guidance, and it's accessible, and people can have a conversation about, look, I'm doing this now, what are my options, what is available to me in order for me to take advantage of that and really progress my career or develop myself for whatever reason. So I think that strength of, it's not just about what are you going to do at 16, 17, 18? It's about that continuous conversation about development, and whether that's from a qualification or a piece of training or the coaching or mentoring, it's all really important to get that into a package that students know how to access.
Yeah.
I think there's. Sorry,
Listen.
No, I was just going to say, it's. I had an interesting conversation actually today with someone about their age and in terms of education, and I think a really big important part of it is empowering them to know that it's okay to study at whatever age it is. Like, there's no shame in it, and I think that's part of our job as lecturing staff as well, is to empower them to know that it's okay to change your mind or do this qualification at this age. Like, it doesn't have any representation of your ability or anything like that, so embrace it completely.
Yeah. Sharon, we haven't got very long left, and I do just want to get your view, and indeed Fiona's view as well, on the sort of lifelong loan entitlement. You know, this idea that in the future people of any age will get the equivalent of, I think it's 4 years post-compulsory education and training, and you can take out a loan. So at the moment, the only way you can take out a loan for full-time education, course fees, maintenance, is to go off to university. So what the government is saying in the future is that it doesn't really matter what pathway you're on, at what point in your life, from 2025 you'll be able to access this loan. Do you think that might encourage more lifelong learning, Sharon, or less?
It's an interesting one, because if we go right back to the beginning of what we started off with the panel, which is on levelling up, what you're encouraging people to do is to potentially get into debt to learn. And nobody should have to get into debt to learn. You know, I'm an absolute firm believer in that. My husband and I often talk about the fact that he went to university and he didn't have to pay, yet, you know, my niece went to university and she's got debt. So then if you bring in more debt, why do you need to do it as a loan? If you're going to loan the money, why don't you just put it into the education system for people to be able to draw down on it, as opposed to having a loan that they have to pay back? I don't think that that's going to widen uptake on education, because people see it as another.
Well, there's a relatively controversial free speech opinion there from Sharon. We should scrap loans, Fiona, and maybe have a lifelong learning grant then instead. What do you think of that?
Well, I think we definitely need, so it's a lifelong learning entitlement, that's really important, isn't it? And I think it's absolutely true. If you want to get people who are going to take that first step back into learning, maybe, then positioning it as a loan, it can be really problematic. And also, it only covers fees, and actually if you're older and you've got a mortgage to pay and bills to pay, then actually how do we cope with those other costs as well? But actually there's another kind of part to that as well, in that when you all get to work, actually what you won't be able to do very easily is take 2 years off and go into a college and study. So if we want people to learn throughout their lives, then we need to make sure that those learning opportunities are at the right time, in the right place, they're the right size. So it might be something you can do of an evening or of a weekend, or you can do in chunks, or you can do online, or you can do, so that kind of mix of making sure that we've got the right offer to you at the right stage of your life, and that you've got the right financial support to do that well. Now, hopefully, when you're engaged in that sort of learning, there will be financial benefits, and that's where the kind of loan system comes from. But we want to make sure that everybody gets the opportunity to do this. Then we need to think really carefully about making sure those opportunities are accessible and affordable.
Thanks for that. Steph, the producer's in my ear saying I've got 30 seconds to wrap up Skills World Live this week, but it'd be really good to get your sense of those inspirational stories and the advice that you received, and just hold that mic in front of you.
Very inspirational stories from each of the panel. Obviously, as an adult learner myself, I was out of college for about 20 plus years. So coming back, it was like a little bit daunting. I wasn't sure. I put it off for a couple of years coming back, but I'm really happy that I am back. And hearing the individual stories and working with the lecturers and fellow students as well, it's really helped me build my confidence and stuff. So, yeah.
Great. Well, thanks for that.
You're listening to the Skills World Live radio show with Tom Bewick.
Well, there you have it. Inspirational stories from students at Walsall College and, of course, my super informed panel of guests. I'd like to thank now, of course, our sponsor, Pearson BTEC and Apprenticeship, for making these tours possible, and all the students and staff here today that have made this co-production with us. So do get Googling Flame Productions, or was it Flame Media, or Flame Futures? Tell us what it is
Future
exactly.
Flames Productions.
There we go. I got it completely wrong. Future Flame Production. It's been fantastic to work with Melissa and her team. Every single one of you are the superstars, and you deserve to do really well, as we just heard there, in your future careers. Don't forget, if you're at FE College and you want the show to visit you, drop us a line at skillsworld@fenews.co.uk. And finally, do make sure you subscribe to the show at FE News or wherever you get your podcasts. Next week, I'll be jetting across the pond, where I'll be in Washington, DC, broadcasting a live episode of what we're calling Skills World Stateside, so do tune in for that. And if you want to know what's happening in the world of American apprenticeships, then this is definitely an episode you won't want to miss. But alas now, from the heart of the Midlands engine, the birthplace of the first industrial revolution, it's goodbye from the Black Country, and it's one last goodbye from Walsall College.
Remember to subscribe to Skills World Live at fenews.co.uk, or just download the show from any one of your favourite podcasting sites, including iTunes, Spotify and Spreaker. Your world, Skills World.